learning more about the legal implications behind the special counsel's indictments and what it means for the president and the Russia investigation going forward. For analysis, let's turn to former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti. He joins me now by phone. Renato, the president once again suggesting that he's been vindicated. Is that your read?
No, not at all. I mean, what I would take from this indictment is that there is no conclusion that's been reached by a special counsel Mueller or anyone at the Justice Department or FBI regarding whether or not there was collusion with the Russians or whether or not the Russians influenced the outcome of the election. What this indictment lays out is substantial evidence that the Russians financed a very sophisticated operation to interfere with our elections here in the United States, that they tried to sway the outcome of the election in favor of the president. Now, whether or not anyone in his campaign was involved is something the indictment doesn't speak to yet. But as we heard from Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, that investigation is ongoing. This indictment does not speak to that. And what we should be looking out for in the weeks and months ahead is what, if anything, Robert Mueller and his team ultimately announces regarding the involvement of other Americans, including potentially associates of the president.
Talk to me a little bit more about that, that angle, because as you mentioned, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein made clear yesterday no signs of collusion from the Trump campaign with these particular indictments. So what do you think that means moving forward on the subject of collusion?
Sure. So, as you pointed out, Raina, Rod Rosenstein was very careful to say nothing in these indictments about that. We, on the same day, they did introduce charges against an individual who was an American who did aid the Russians, although there was no indication that he knew that he was aiding Russian nationals, but he did engage in identity theft. I think what folks at home need to realize is that anyone who knowingly aids somebody in criminal activity is also responsible for that criminal activity. What we know from this indictment is that the Russians and these Russian entities committed crimes in the United States. They were, based upon the indictment, there's charges that they manipulated our election, they engaged in fraud, they stole the identities of Americans and used them to try to help, in this case, the Trump campaign and others, and to also suppress votes. So the question is, was there an American who knew about this operation and helped to make it succeed? That is the legal standard, and that is what Robert Mueller and his team are continuing to investigate.
And if you had to read further into it, do you think that this unnamed American from Florida named in these indictments, do you think an arrest could be coming?
Well, it looks to me that individual is cooperating with Mueller. That's my read on the legal documents that were filed. It appears to be a cooperation agreement, and my guess is that his aid in the probe is what helped lead to this indictment. Now, the question is, what about individuals who are, associated with the president and his campaign? Well, time will tell there. We know there are a number of people who are cooperating with Special Counsel Mueller. You have Mr. Papadopoulos, obviously General Michael Flynn, and others. So time will tell as to whether or not they're able to provide evidence to Special Counsel Mueller that leads him to conclude that there were people associated with the Trump campaign who knew about this criminal activity and moved it forward in some way.
Renato, you know well the tactics that are used to sort of build a case and present it and bring it forward. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at this, we all know it's not Putin's style. He's not going to turn over these folks, these Russians, in any sort of situation. We can't expect that. Mm-hmm. These guys are likely going to get off. They're likely not going to face justice. So why do you think the Mueller team chose to indict?
Now, that is a great question, and I think the most likely answer is one of two reasons. Either, first, they thought that this would help induce other people to cooperate. In other words, seeing that the evidence laid out and seeing that they were pursuing charges against the Russians could potentially have an effect on people here in America who assisted their efforts, help convince them that it would be in their interest to cooperate with Mueller because ultimately they could be charged. Or alternatively, Special Counsel Mueller thought that perhaps it was important for the public to know about these charges. One thing that people don't realize is that in criminal investigations, grand jury investigations, the evidence you uncover is a secret, and everything about the investigation is a secret. And you cannot reveal that to the public unless there's an indictment or some sort of charge that's brought. And that was very frustrating for me at times when I was a federal prosecutor and I investigated crimes that I wasn't ultimately able to produce charges on. So I think, one thing that happened here, I think, is a valuable public service, which is the public learning that there was a sophisticated foreign operation to undermine our elections.
Renato Mariotti, thank you for joining us, Renato.
Thank you. You have a good one.